our dogs are, though.
Except the 1% or less than that.
Yeah.
Where Roscoe's just like getting up, sniffing shit, and Grayson won't growl. It's like he forgot to warn him.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, what are you doing, man? You can't just do that.
I think the problem is, right, so a lot of people in that scenario, you'll just go in and like just start correcting the dog for the behavior, you know, which, whatever. I mean, it's not that it's so incorrect, but like our goal is not to eliminate the correction altogether, right? Our goal is just to teach them to take it down a couple of notches, you know? So the more we correct for it, it kind of can have like a counterintuitive effect where like we correct for it, which teaches them that we don't want them to do it all together, so they just bottle it up until they can't bottle it up anymore, and then they go in with like a level 12 intensity with it, you know? Where sometimes in those scenarios, if I start noticing too much of it, I won't correct, I'll maybe just slap a muzzle on them temporarily for a little bit or something and let them rehearse it at that level 12 to realize that
it's not working.
You don't have, well, no, it does work, but you don't need to do it at that intensity. You know what I mean?
You don't need to necessarily open your mouth.
Exactly, right? So if they realize, okay, the 12 worked, maybe next time they'll try a 10, right? And then next time they'll try an 8, you know? And it can, on its own, decrease its intensity then. We've seen that a lot with dogs fighting in the same household, right? Where we'll kind of let them like, you know, we'll muzzle them up and kind of let them like duke it out for a minute, you know? And what happens is they wind up exhausting themselves, just going and doing something else. And then the next time they try to fight, same deal. They'll fight, but it'll be a little less intense, and then we let them kind of figure it out, right? And then it over time just de-escalates itself, right? So you were asking like things different, right? I look at like aggressive behaviors in social as more on a spectrum now, you know what I mean? As opposed to like it's aggressive or it's not aggressive, right? Aggression, if you look at it, and play, right? Play on this end of the spectrum, aggression on this end of the spectrum is really just a display of dominance in a more intense version. You know what I mean? So if you look at it that way, you could recalibrate your expectation of I want this to go away altogether to I just want you to continue to take it back a couple of notches.
Because when you limit them or correct them from thinking that they did a wrong thing, then there's something.
Exactly.
They're doing what they're naturally like, I can protect myself, right?
Yeah, and or, right, like, they're just communicating when they like things and when they don't like things, right? Which, that's the only way they know how to do it, right? So, it's kind of unrealistic to say it's just never going to happen.
Right.
My big thing is...
Down. Good.
Not feeding food out.
Okay.
If you don't
Down.
feed food out, then what's the point of ever relying on it? So you're just going to carry treats around all... You know?
Yeah. I don't know. That one I don't have as much of an issue with because I think that one's more lifestyle dependent, you know? So like I think that, I think there's some people that like to reward their dog for things, you know? Which is fine, right? Like I have no issue with that.
They should, and they can, and they should.
Yeah.
Whatever. But why not, like, if you don't fade it out as a trainer to know the dog can do it well,
Yeah.
then I feel like you're not finishing the job.
I agree. Yeah. No, I would say I agree with you. It's just at when in the process does that happen? So for example, I was bringing up the couple dogs that like I spent way more time motivating them because I knew I could get firm on them later. A couple of those dogs in particular, I never faded food with them through the process, like in their board and train, but in their follow-up lesson I did, right? Because listen, I know with 100% certainty, once I've shaped the command with food, I could go in and in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, finish that command with just e-collar, right? It's not that hard to do, right? But because I wanted the owner for that first week to develop a good working relationship with the dog, I didn't want to risk me squashing the drive by doing that preemptively before the dog went home. You know what I mean? Which it still would have worked. The dog still would have been doing the thing, but it would have killed the owner's ability to do the stuff with food themselves. And I then run the risk in today's climate again of people being like, well, the dog is scared right now. You know what I mean? Where in the follow-up lesson, once the owner has had a chance to do that and develop the relationship and see the limitations of doing it with just food sometimes, from there I could show them how to do it without the food and totally fix those problems and sidestep all of those potential issues. You know what I mean? For sure, because there's some dogs, it depends on the issues also, right? Because like if I have a dog that's coming in with serious problems, I don't have the luxury of being able to be like, well, I want to prioritize the dog being happy and motivated, right? But if the dog is just coming in for training, it's like I could put my emphasis on that, and then we could fix the little problems they're having later, you know? So, come. That's it, you know, he just needs you to get back on him over some stuff.
I know. I should have done it for these 3 months, but I was like, I'm just going right back on.
Yeah.
Let him run free again. And I was like, shit.
Well, listen, I mean, like, I don't work on this stuff with Vinny all the time, for example, right?
Yeah.
But I know if I need to get him to do it, I can get him to do it, you know? But honestly, dude, Vinny does whatever the fuck Vinny wants at this point, you know what I mean? And like I said, when guests come over, he'll still hold his bed stays, you know, and he still comes when called and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not asking him to do those things all the time, right? So, you know, do you live your life with him, right? And let him do whatever. But if you start noticing that a particular thing is slipping, just spend a short amount of time working through that. Down. You know, particularly, again, the bed stay, that was shot at the beginning, right? So, like, periodically, if you notice, like, down. If you notice his duration sucks with something, just spend a couple days doing some duration stuff, and then don't fucking worry about it for another 6 months, you know? That's how I try to look at stuff with my dogs, because, like, you get overwhelmed really quickly if you try to worry about everything all the time. You know, and especially if you're not using it all the time, it's like, you know, why do I care, right? Come, let's get this dude back. How about the walking that you were working on?
It's been better.
Okay.
I probably stayed around between like levels 9 through 11.
Oh, okay. So he's not as sensitive as he was here?
Yeah, so
Good.
he's like doesn't even really react to anything below that.
Yep.
And I feel like I mostly corrected him in the beginning, and then like he gets it.
Perfect.
And we walk really well. So
That's the goal.
and it's pretty minimal correcting after that.
Yep.
So.
See if he starts barking at the camera again. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's all progress. So what we'll do is we'll focus a little bit in here today. I want to start getting some of his like positions and stuff situated.
Okay.
Anything else to note in the last week?
I guess the only thing was, so my fiance came to visit.
Yep.
And we were like in the elevator, and he hasn't seen him in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So he's never like reacted to dogs until they're reacted to him.
Sure.
Usually, but this dog, like he kind of went in front of him. I think.
Yeah.
Because people will just let their dogs run in the elevator.
Yeah.
So I always try to make sure he's behind me before we walk out.
Yeah.
And so the dog was just like standing there, and the owner like wasn't moving him. So then he like got
Yes.
really barky, like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Here's the hard thing, right? That's a very unnatural thing for a dog to tolerate, you know, like, and 9 out of 10 times dogs are going to act poorly in that situation if some random dog just comes and gets in their space while they're in a confined area and on a tight leash, you know? So it's a normal response on his end for stuff like that to happen. And really, that's the hard thing about like apartment living and stuff like that, is essentially you have all these dogs living in like one building, right? But they all live in separate houses or areas within that building. So they see each other so frequently in these places that they perceive as their territory, but they're not like a part of the same house, right? So you can see a lot of really quirky, weird behaviors. And that's where I always tell everybody, it is like extra strict if you live in that type of environment, to be really on top of him as far as the rules when you're outside of your front door, right? Like so in the hallways, in the elevator, stuff like that. And then you want to be very proactive about, especially being in the elevators and stuff like that. If you notice, like if you're waiting for an elevator and comes down, there's 2 dogs in there, just wait for the next one.
Yeah, that's what
you know.
I never go in the same one. I'm like, we'll wait. It's not worth it.
And try to proactively, if somebody is waiting, like, hey, you know, let me situate myself real quick first or something, you know.
But like in my mind, I'm thinking, like, because Connor was asking, like, okay, so where in the training is like we gonna make that stop? So in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, I would get him to sit in a position and stay seated until I say okay to get up, so he wouldn't react.
So you're correct,
Okay.
kind of, right? So yes, realistically, like in the elevator, we would enforce a stationary command, right? And yeah, if he's not holding that stationary command, he's gonna get a correction for that. And it's gonna be that, you know, if nobody's messing with you, you need to just mind your P's and Q's right there, right? But you still have to address that if the dog is still invading his space, you could only expect our dog to behave themselves and listen and respond under a reasonable amount of distraction, and that teeters out of the line of reasonable amount of distraction. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the thing, right? Like, yes, you can make it substantially better, and we'll get there, obviously. But, you know, you have to address the side of why is the dog reacting in the first place. Dog is reacting in the first place because dogs keep getting in his business, you know?
And it's so fast, it's
Yeah.
like you can't even, it's like the door opens and they're just like.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I set realistic expectations with people about those types of things, because, like, yes, it's going to get way, I'm not telling you it's not going to get better, right? We'll be able to get it a lot better, but you have to proactively make sure we're making the amount of times that exact scenario happens less and less, you know, in order to get, like, the true, like, long-term success with it, so. Okay, good job, buddy. Awesome. So we're gonna take him outside again here, and we're gonna take a look at some of those sits out there. Come on, bud. Sit. Good. Okay. Sit. Good. Okay, all right, now we're gonna take him back inside over here, and we're gonna work a couple of the drop leash ones in there with more distractions.
Okay.
Sit. Good job, buddy. Okay, not too shabby.
I feel like he's so stressed out.
Yeah, part of that is just the environment. You know, he's still getting used to working in the more chaotic environments, and especially since you've seen, obviously in the apartment, like you were saying, in the elevator and stuff like that, his typical response to things like this happening is react. You know what I mean? Once he starts focusing through those things, it's gonna be very challenging for him. You know?
It's good, like, mind work for him.
1000% good mind work. And what you're gonna see is the exact thing we saw last time, where, remember, we started the healing because that was so abnormal to him and so hard for him to do. You saw how stressed he was with it, and then, like you said, you went to go do it then the next week, and it's like, this actually isn't that bad, right?
This is like the same behavior as it was.
It's the exact same thing, and you're probably gonna see a lot of these dogs go through these kind of peaks and valleys of, like, every time we get past a little hurdle, it's like the hardest thing in the world for them, you know? And then they even out with it, right? And then they go through another hurdle, it's really hard, and then they even out with it, right? And overall, each time they accomplish one of those things and kind of come out on the other end, they become a little bit more balanced, a little bit more balanced, a little bit more balanced, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how all of this progresses, obviously. And yeah, 100% good mental stimulation. I mean, just the process of just working through those hurdles. And at first, as soon as those dogs came in, he's like hyperactive, just like, oh my God, what is that? What is that? What is that? And then we got him to a place where he's able to hold those commands and wasn't as hyper fixated on what was going on over there. And yeah, he was internalizing it. He was much more stressed, obviously, but he was able to work past that challenging thing. Through this are for him, but also for you, you know, like a lot of it is just like nothing scary is happening. You know, there's no reason for you to be this stressed about all of this, you know? We just got to get them through it, you know? And a lot of the softer, more insecure dogs need more firm of leaders, you know what I mean? Because, like, that's what they're lacking. They're lacking that confidence to be able to handle these situations on their own, so they need somebody that's going to do that for them. So that's your big hurdle to work through. What's new? Anything?
Not much. He's been pretty good. Yeah, we haven't ran into too many issues. I have a neighbor that has a smaller dog, kind of like that white one, that purple
Yep.
one up there with
Yep.
white shagginess. He's met that dog once, and he went up to sniff it, and it nipped at him, so he nipped back.
Yeah. That was, you said, one of the first social experiences you had with him, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And he actually met my neighbor before he met her dog, and he was all, friendly, jumping up on her, wanting to pet and stuff. But now when he sees her, he's getting kind of anxious. And so I don't know if that's an issue or...
Like when he sees the lady?
Yes, even when she doesn't have her dog.
Yeah.
He's
And when you say he gets a little anxious, what do you mean by that?
He does like a lunge. At first he sees her, his tail's wagging, but then as she's walking away, he does like a lunge towards her. But to me, it doesn't feel like a happy, I want to get pet lunge, but more of a he's anxious or afraid lunge or something.
Threatened,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's attributing the dog that she has to her or mixing that somehow or what's going on there.
Forget the why behind it. A lot of times I look at like it's just an inappropriate behavior, right? And it's something we don't want him to do. So per whatever expectation you're holding him to at that point, we would correct for that with the same intensity as with the dog reactivity and stuff. Sometimes we get separated in our head like dog reactivity is the really serious problem we're having, right? So that is what we need to go in and be really firm about, and we use our higher levels for and stuff. But everything else, because that's not the primary focus, we'll still correct for it, but we'll let it slide a little bit more so than we would like the dog reactivity, Where I look at any of those types of behaviors, I want to go into them with the same intensity so he realizes regardless of the issue, whether it's a small issue or whether it's a big issue, you still can't do that. Right? So I'd be looking at that all the same with that. And, again, if he's off leash, I'm sure he would be fine in that context. But on leash with the additional frustration, and if he's a little bit stressed out because of the other dog or whatever it may be, it's not uncommon that you'll see some stuff like that. But I would recommend, at least for now, if you do notice it, same intensity with your correction for working through that.
All right.
So, anything else?
No, I think he's been pretty good about everything else. We've been practicing the stop and goes.
Yep.
The come and making sure that he's level with me. He's been pretty good about it. Not 100%, but it's very good, yeah.
Good, cool. Have you been seeing a lot of dogs out and about on your walks still?
I would say a handful of them, yeah. And what I usually do is, if I see them first, I'll put them into a sit until he sees them, and depending on which way they're going. So we'll move out of the way so that they cross us.
Yep.
But he's been pretty well behaved about sitting there.
Good.
Let's see. He hasn't seen the neighbor's dog in a while, but there is another dog that looks almost like him. That comes out and about, and that one has just as much energy as him, and they feed off of it.
How convenient,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll continue plugging away with some of this other stuff. If for whatever reason we still haven't even really gotten to like public stuff with him, which we're going to get to here soon. So we got a little bit of work to do with him still. We'll get to that kind of stuff and finish off those last things. The important thing right now that I'm just looking for is that we're still seeing progress in the right direction, which he's clearly still doing pretty good. So, all right, looks pretty good. So last step here is we're going to turn this into like an implied stay. So what we're going to do is we're going to give that come command. I'm going to start walking around the room here. And at this point, I expect that he stays with me, right? So we're just essentially adding duration into the position. So I'll tell him, Albert, come. Start walking. And just like with our leash walking, I would correct if he got out of position then at this point. Pretty good. Good. Once he does well with it, we'll come to a stop and reward for that. Albert, come. I'll let him kind of fix himself initially with that. If he persists with it, I'll give a correction for it. No. Albert, come. Good work, buddy. I'll try that one more time. Albert, come. Good. So we're going to push that to the side here. We're going to get into some socialization stuff again here next. He said the white fluffy one was his thing, so I figured we had a good one for that. Now, same intensity with going in, but this time once he got to her, instead of the frantic snapping and stuff, sniffing. Very positive. This one's pretty crazy too. It's like we're recreating his worst nightmare, you know? He's like, you followed me. This is good. Starting out very positive. Come here. That was pretty good. Get this thing off you.
That was
Phenomenal. Yeah. So this showcased two big things, right? So thing number one is that, like I suspected that very first time we let the dog in, this is not an aggression issue, this is an under-socialization issue, right? He's too overstimulated by the sight of other dogs that he's displaying these aggressive-looking behaviors, right? And I'm not saying they're appropriate by any means. We definitely needed to correct for them that one time and the second time as well, right? But I don't think it was with the intent of aggression. I think it was just this bottled up, under-socialized and kind of restricted away from other dogs, and suddenly the barrier's gone. It's just explosion of energy, right? Second thing this showcased was that all of those behaviors we were seeing verifies kind of what we talk about a lot, which is these types of behaviors, these aggressive looking behaviors, whatever, socialization stuff, it's all just a spectrum, because he did the same things as he's done in the past. When we let the dog in, he still did the charge at the dog, but it's in a little bit less intense of an end of the spectrum. So what we'll find next time is maybe when the dog comes in, instead of the charge over and sniff, it'll be walk over and sniff. You know what I mean? Then it'll turn into walk over and start playing right away, right? And it'll continue moving along on that spectrum, because it's not like we're turning off the bad behavior and on the good behavior. We're just making the behavior less intense overall. You know what I mean? So that was phenomenal. I really liked that. That was really good. So we'll continue pushing with that, you know. He did really good with the common command. He started off a little wonky today. I think that was just kind of spun up, the dog down there, whatever you said before you left the house, stuff like that. But it wasn't a big problem. He focused back in fine, you know. So, and the common command looked really great. So, he looks good. Have any questions on any of that?
Really good there, Albert. I guess the question would be the muzzle we're using. Would it be worth it for him to wear that when we're outside if we're expecting any dogs to be near, or?
No, because it's only going to be used in situations he's actually interacting with other dogs.
Okay.
And out on the walk, he's never going to be interacting with other dogs.
Yeah.
Now, would it be a good idea for you to get one just to have for when you start socializing them on your own? Yeah, of course, right? But we're almost there, but we're not quite there yet.
All right.
So I would say one more, honestly, like if he does the same thing he did today next time and it looks pretty good, we'll probably actually take that muzzle off next time and see what we get. So, because I think he probably would have been fine with both of those dogs. So, looks awesome though. That was good.